I don't know if this is working. I thought I was going live now. Ah. Do. Good evening. How are you? I'm James. You probably know that because you're on my personal profile. And we need to talk about mental health. Or maybe I do. But either case, we're going to have a chat about it. We're just going to have an informal chat. Today is Mental Health Day. I figured it's as good a day as any to talk about it. If you've been on my personal profile lately, you can see I'm doing a video challenge. It's called the 365 Driven Challenge, and I'm on day 7 right now. The idea is that we do a video every day for the month of October. Today I figured I'd do a live session. The other ones have just been like me hanging around with the kids and just being a goofball. But here's my video for today. I figured, again, today is Mental Health Day, and mental health is something that a lot of us have dealt with and struggled with over the years. But myself also just wanted to hop on and talk about what I've experienced. Maybe that can help somebody else reach out and get the help that they need. First off, like, I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form. I'm not claiming to have the answers for people. I'm just going to share my story, and hopefully you guys will share your story in the comments as well as things go on. So yeah, let us know what you're struggling with and what you find difficult. You know, maybe you're going through a tough period of time through bereavement or a job loss, or maybe you've got something more chronic, which is my deal, which, you know, for me, I've been struggling with mental health issues for, you know, a long time. I'm 12. Since I was 12, I'm 38 now. Whatever 38 minus 12 is, I don't do math. I do logic, but not math. So if there's anything that you might get out of this yip yap that I'm giving right now, the main thing I want to say is that if you feel you're struggling and you need help, make sure you reach out on today of all days, and understand that getting better to a place of at least being content is going to be a process for you. It's going to take some time. So also, don't be afraid to get help. You break your leg, you go and you get help, right? Usually, I mean, unless you're, in some really weird situation where you don't want to have a broken leg fixed or looked at, you're probably going to go get help. It's the same for mental health. The only difference is mental health is a much more complex picture. I describe it as being a puzzle that has pieces that the shape and size constantly changes it. So it's difficult to figure out. My story, also, the one of the reasons I'm doing this video right now, although it's pretty uncomfortable for me, I figured I'd do it anyway as part of this challenge. The stigma against mental health does seem to be receding a little, and that's encouraging. I feel like more people are going through this in time, especially with information overload that we've seen in the last couple of years, with especially even if we go back like 10 years, how we consume content and how we communicate with each other has changed drastically. We process more information than we ever have in any other time in our lives or before. So my story, despite the issues that I've struggled with over the years and I continue to struggle with, I'm pretty fortunate that I've been able to remain highly functioning during that time. I'm not really sure why I've been able to do that. I probably shouldn't be able to function, but for some reason the part of my brain that figures out issues and problems continues to work when I'm going through a depressive state. So whereas it hasn't affected my work, it has obviously affected my personal life a lot. My family and my relationships with my wife, my kids. A lot of it through not really having, going back when I unraveled it some. A lot of it was just not having enough empathy for myself to give myself space to understand my new role going back 10 years as a parent. So depression for me started at 12. Since then I've picked up a couple of other little issues on the way. My clinical diagnosis is GAD, general anxiety disorder. And honestly, until I was like 28, I didn't even know what anxiety was. I'd heard of it. I didn't think I experienced it. All I thought was that I was just a really angry bastard all the time. I'm very crabby. And as things transpired, that was the anxiety. That is how anxiety has exacerbated itself with me. Again, super crabby, super irritable, super short-tempered. And that showed its ugly head mostly for and in front of family and friends. Work, it wasn't really a problem. For some reason, I was able to hold it back while I was at work, but not so much in the family situation. So GAD, dysthymia, which is, let me read it out here, it's basically a catch-all phrase for depression. It's a persistent depressive disorder, a continuous long-term chronic form of depression, which is, something I've had since 12 or so. So that sucks. And then lastly, I think lately there's like a little sprinkle of bipolar, just a teeny bit, which makes sense given my family history. So those are the things that I, try to continuously manage and work with. And if you're watching right now, you could comment maybe. If not, I'll just continue to yap here. So what's worked for me, and when I say worked, it helped me manage some of those issues. And I've tried over the years a bunch of different things. Holistic approach is kind of my approach to most things. Is I try to take a holistic but objective approach. I think it's important to be open-minded, but some people, I find, they get open-minded, but they're also kind of gullible. They cling to anything that that they just hope will work, and they're not being very objective about it. So I think the best approach is to have one of open-mindedness and objectivity. And during that path, as I say, I've tried a bunch of different things, and in that time, a lot of things changed my life. I moved countries. Got married twice to the same woman. That's another story. Really, we just got married once in Ireland and once here. But anyway, of course, we bought a house, had some kids, and that was when I really had to figure out how I was going to manage my issues and how they exacerbated. And of course, I wanted to raise a good human being, and so I had to do a lot of work to try and understand what that would look like. So the last year or so, I've been doing more and more meditation, which has helped. Helps give me focus, which then gives me some kind of I think that gives like self-efficacy. I think that's why that's cascaded. 5 minutes a day is just it. Like I'm not sitting down for 40 minutes in some crazy position. Like there's one YouTube video I watch, and it's more or less affirmations on the day of I'm gonna get shit done. I'm gonna try and have a positive outlook on the day. That for 5 minutes, just taking 5 minutes out, break, do some stretches, whatever. That's helped. And working out when I do it definitely helps. For me at least, it's gonna release endorphins, and just generally help your state of being. The other thing that's helped me with, in terms of productivity is, and it's super simple, but it's just making sure that I plan the next day on the day before. I wouldn't have thought something so simple would make a huge difference, but really, if I'm able to have the wherewithal, for example, tonight, I'll sit down for about 20-30 minutes, I'll go through my priorities, and I'll schedule those on my calendar tomorrow. Not meetings, not tasks, but high-level priorities that I need to do to move the ball forward. So, who have we got online with us here? It doesn't actually show me. What's going on? Well, that's a bummer. Somebody leave a comment, say hello. Wear my heart in my sleeve here. No, huh? No questions even for me. Maybe they'll come up afterwards. So that's a synopsis of my story. I don't know. Hey Jake, there he is. You got somebody there. Yeah, that's a synopsis of my story, and especially on Mental Health Day, I figured it would be a good time to hop online and just talk a little about it, and talk a little about, you know, what I've struggled with. Maybe it can be helpful to somebody else. And again, to go back to my main point and re-emphasize it, you know, if you're struggling in some way, reach out today of all days. And not just reach out once, but continue to do so. Understand that it's going to be a long, gradual road, and that's going to be pretty winding. You're probably going to have to change your tactics and your approaches and your methods to getting better with as time goes on and as your situation changes. Let me see if I have anything else to talk about here. Oh, here's one thing I made some notes of. Some positives that I believe have come from as a result of my MH issues, mental health issues. And one of those is that I've built a lot of resilience. Maybe too much in some ways, but I've built a lot of resilience through having to get shit done and be an adult through either anxiety or depression or, you know, whatever's going on. One thing that I'm particularly happy about and proud of is that my kids, you know, through my learnings and my attempts to teach my children how to better manage their emotions and their well-being and their mental state. My daughter, who's 10 years old, has a sense of self-awareness that I hadn't acquired until I was in my 30s. And that just warms my heart. It's just amazing to see that. She's just got so much self-awareness, and she's got so much empathy. And these are things that took me a long time to learn. Empathy for myself and empathy for my friends. And actually what I'm doing with my daughter right now, my eldest, is I do affirmations with her. Because I can see a little bit of the shame creep in when, you know, she makes a mistake, right? She, like last month, best example, she burned up all the data in our account in like 3 days. And we have 30 gigs or more of data, and she just burned right through it. And of course we were pissed. And we expressed that to her, and that may not be the best way to go, but nonetheless, when we did that, one thing I noticed was that I could see that she had shut down. And it immediately reminded me of myself, of going into the shame spiral and allowing mistakes that we made to define who we are when they are just mistakes or just thoughts. So what came out of that is a list of affirmations that I do with her. And we try and do it every day. We're going to try and do it for 66 days as a habit. And the idea is just to kind of reinforce the idea that for her, you know, or anybody really, that's why I do them with her. You know, if you make a mistake, that doesn't make you a bad person, depending on what that mistake is. But ordinarily, right, most mistakes that we make, it's something you did, but it's not necessarily who you are. And actually, one of the breakthroughs that I had for me, obviously, because I didn't have a breakthrough for anybody else, was I read a book by Brene Brown, and you guys have probably heard of Brene Brown. She's known for the TED Talk where she had the meltdown. She's a badass. She's a really, really, really smart researcher, and has done some really interesting research. But in short, I read this book called Men, Women, and Worthiness. And the key takeaway from that for me was the distinction between shame and guilt. Shame is I am, and guilt is I did. And those are, at least for me, were two incredibly powerful distinctions, because, you know, I think we've all felt shame at some point because of something we did. And you just go into a spiral that just compounds things, and it affects your perspective on yourself, on life, and how you interact with others. It's destructive. It's a destructive force. So that's shame. And often we will, well, I can't speak for other people, I can speak for me. Often when I would make a mistake, even a minor one, I would go into a shame spiral, which would compound. For example, I'm a shit dad, right? And that just gets worse and worse. And all the other negative self-talk kind of comes down on top of that. Um, versus guilt. I made a mistake. I fucked up. I did something wrong. I upset somebody. I hurt somebody. But that doesn't define who I am. Of course, if you keep doing shitty things to people, then that's a different realm. But again, we're talking about, reasonably decent people. And then to circle back to shame. So the one thing that shame cannot tolerate is empathy. And that was those two things. One, understanding what shame is, what it did, and how it affected me. And then how to combat it with empathy. Those two things were incredibly powerful. The idea of me having empathy for myself was just completely remote. Like, because I felt crappy about myself, because I felt that I couldn't, that I was constantly kind of held back by these ailments or these, these issues that I had. So that made it really difficult. But then somebody said to me, hi.
Key.
What key?
Your car key.
Anxiety. Somebody said to me, James, you should care for your depression. And I looked at her and I'm like, what? I don't want to care for my fucking depression. I want to kill it. I want to destroy it. It's like the most destructive force that I can imagine. It holds me back. It stops me from reaching my full potential. It stops me from connecting with my kids and my wife. Why would I want to care for my depression? And it took me a while to kind of realize that really what she was trying to say was that, it's not going away. The depression is always going to be there. It's just a case of how I manage it. Really what she meant was that I have some empathy for myself and just kind of accept that this shit's going to happen. And no matter what, right? Water's wet. We won't get too technical about that. It's technically not wet, but let's just say water's wet, right? And to just kind of identify it and almost come at peace with it. And so through that, and then I was able to have empathy for myself. And through that, I was able to take down some of those blocks of shame. That was transformational for me. So there you go. That book again was Men, Women, and Worthiness by Brene Brown. That was, right around the time, shortly after I had our first kid, who's 10 years old now. So 10 years ago. It's funny how that works. That was just incredibly powerful. Just those, it's barely a paragraph. But for me, it was so profound. So if you're struggling with mental health, I hope you have found or will find, the equivalent of my Brene Brown book where, you get an aha moment and you suddenly come across a way to identify what you're dealing with and to accept it and to develop a plan to manage it. It's not going to go away. At least it's not like it'll go away for me. Maybe for some people it will. I don't know. Certainly for people who don't have chronic disorders, but again, bereavement, loss of job, all those kind of things where they're temporal. So to a lesser extent with those. I don't know, any questions for me? Anybody? My heart. Let me sleeve here. I even set up the pretty lights and put my microphone up. Look. Who's watching? I got 5 people watching now. This is incredible. If you just joined, I've been talking a lot about depression and my experience with it, and anxiety and everything else that might be mental health related. And I figured that today being, hey Eric, I figured today being Mental Health Day, I'd just hop on and do something as part of this daily challenge that I have, which is putting out 1 video a day for the month of October. And most of them, well, all of them so far have been a lot more lighthearted than this one. But again, I had to do a video today. It's Mental Health Day. And, I've been kind of wanting to just push myself to talk about this in public. I'm not sure if that's a good idea or not, but it is what it is. And, my issues are not going away. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, well, I mean, there's 5 people watching, so, it's not like our, Carpool show where there's, 100 people watching and 1,000 people watching later, and, So I'm just trying to think if I can share anything else. I made some notes. Actually spent quite a bit of time making notes because I'm not good at talking on the fly. At least not when I'm sober. And it looks like we have a comment here. Adam, yeah, you know, funny. Yeah. So to call out what Adam Cupsey is saying, he says, "Trust me, the more you talk openly, the easier and better it feels." And yeah, I mean that's true. Even just through talking about this right now, and just some demo runs to get some notes going, to kind of get my thoughts together on what I think I might say, and also leaving space for others to jump in. All of that combined with the one video a day thing I've been doing, yeah, it's pretty interesting. I even, you know, I mean, Eric will attest to this. Like, usually video for me is like I sit down and I like nitpick forever, and the result is still not how I want it to be. Whereas this week, it's like I record a bunch of clips on my phone, which is really weird because normally I like have to have the mic and the gimbal and all that stuff that I don't really need. Then I just throw it together in a clip and I just upload it and it's done. Next day, do a new thing. So that's how I arrived at this one today. Trying to think, what else can we talk about with mental health? We're down to 4 people. We lost somebody. I've been on now for 21 minutes. So I'm trying to think. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I have any interesting or unusual insights that I can share. Having said that, I just saw my face freeze on the screen. That's no good. Hey, here's a question. How is everybody today? Like, comment, and subscribe. And we need to talk about mental health. We do. Ideally, consult a professional, but in the absence of a professional, consult a friend, a close friend that you can confide in. And again, understand that you're going to have to do that more than once, probably many times and repeatedly. All right, I think we're running out of momentum here. You know, maybe I'll do this again. Why not? Screw it. I was going to have my daughter Neve come in and see if she wanted to talk about anxiety, but she kind of shied away from it. Eric, comment from Eric Gunderson. I guess I'm curious on your thought of post-diagnosis steps. Seems so much at the MH, which is mental health community, is focused around prevention rather than long-term community or prognosis. Eric, you always have great questions and insights, you know that? You always make me stop and think and be like, wow. The only thing I can think of really is that it varies greatly. My experience hasn't been that it's more of the prevention. I almost wish it was more. But having said that, yeah, you know, my case for a series of reasons is kind of unique in the US. I'm not from here. I come from Ireland, for those who don't know. And at least when I left there 16 years ago, there was more of a stigma of mental health, or against, if that's the correct term. So the post-diagnosis steps, I mean, I guess that really depends on what you're diagnosed with, and who diagnoses you. And I don't know if Eric, I don't know if you caught me talking about this earlier, but at least, you know, my opinion for what it's worth is, or my observation as well, is that depression and mental health issues are incredibly complex. You're dealing with a lot of different things. Of course, you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with thought patterns, you're dealing with chemistry, you're dealing with physiology, you're dealing with all these different things that are constantly changing and they're entirely dynamic. So it's very difficult to get a sense of what is going to work, and what works now might not work in 2 or 3 years. So, and I've lost my train of thought here. Post-diagnosis steps is what you asked about. Yes, so the point it's going to make is that every situation is unique. And I think, this is kind of a broad thing for healthcare too in general. It's important to take ownership of your healthcare and be actively involved. Because, and it's not because, at least in my experience, it's not because people will intentionally do harm. It's because a lot of the time, if you're dealing with a provider, I mean, they're knowledgeable, they're experienced, and they do their best, but they're also, in most cases, very stretched out. And so the diagnoses can be quite superficial, and the treatments can be very, canned, a canned approach. It really depends on the provider that you have and how you gel with them, and if you're asking the right questions. How do you know if you're asking the right questions? I don't know. I mean, curiosity is the first thing, right? So I think it's important to have a holistic but objective approach to everything and anything, but especially with your health. Take ownership of your health, and by that I mean, be an active player in the role of trying to understand whatever ailments or whatever else it is about your body or your mind that you're trying to figure out with your physician, or your NP or your nurse or your dietitian or whoever or whatever it is. So take a holistic and objective approach, and be open-minded, but I say that with caution, because what I see is in all kinds of spectrums of life, and who am I to frickin' talk about anybody else doing something, but my belief is that a lot of people go in with open-minded, but they go in without objectivity, and their open-mindedness leads them to gullibility and confirmation bias, and just going down a path of something that, even though it's not working for them, they're just in complete denial. So I think it's important to remain open-minded, be objective, and understand that a lot of people, when they try to give you advice, whether it's a physician, a professional, or it's a well-meaning friend or somebody else like me, kind of like when we talk about kart racing and trying to understand the other person's perspective, you get the racers that come in that will talk about their own personal experience and will try to apply that to the person that's new, when really that's not the right approach. They need to just say, this is my experience, here's something for you to consider and weigh against your own litmus test or whatever. The prevention part, I mean, man, that if practically every societal issue we have is rooted in mental health in some way, shape, or form. So I love the idea of prevention. I certainly don't have the answers for it, but I see it, at my kids' schools. There's two of them, two schools, where there's definitely a lot more empathy and a lot more patience with the kids than I would have expected. Probably because there's more resources. So I think it's a good question, Eric. Always giving me something to ponder and making me stop on my tracks. Anybody else got something to pop in there in the comments before we sign off? Comment below. Smash that like button. Like Conor McGregor. Wait, no. Don't do that. Like the guy whose name I can't pronounce, that smashed Conor McGregor. Alright, I think we're done here. Give it a little bit of lag. See if anybody else has anything to say. And then I think we'll call it an evening. Thanks for watching, everybody that did. Hope it was helpful, or at least, I don't know, entertaining. Yeah. I'm here to entertain sometimes. Alright, I'm not going to put the 3 people that are watching through any more misery. Thanks for joining in. If you need help, go get it. It's like a broken leg. It needs to be fixed. There's no shame in it. Just frickin' go get help. Talk to somebody. Or I'm going to be pissy. Yep, I'm going to be pissy. I'm probably going to knock on your door and say not nice things to you. How's that for positive reinforcement? Good night.